home? We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore Positive. I am delighted to put these two gentlemen together. We're at Pizza John's. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Magic 8-Ball Scratch-Offs. We're going to be at Fade Lee's in Lexington Market. And look, I could have invited Sheinin down to Lexington Market at Fade Lee's. He's like, lives in the city, all that. All these city guys. You have a hard time getting the county guys into the city. You get a hard time getting a city guy out into the county. Dave Sheinin of the Washington Post is making his Pizza John's debut here in Essex. Luke Jones, his family's from Essex, is returning as the champion of the pepperoni and meat sauce pizza. It is all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. We're delighted to be here in Essex, and I think, Luke, you know this. When you've always, the minute I knew you, you're like, I would say Pizza John's. You're like, Pizza John's. Oh, my God, that's my favorite. That's my family's favorite. And this is like 15 years ago. And they've been a sponsor for on and off for a decade. Big appreciation to Brett and the whole family here. Just everybody treats me with love every time I come in here. And my wife as well, who carries it out all the time. And when I invite people, whomever they are, any of my guests, I try to keep them close to home, because I feel like I'm putting you out to drive out. It's very kind of all of you. I try to feed all of you. But, like, I've had you at like, Fells Point and, in Coco's, that places that are in the city. But I wanted to have you on because it's baseball season. I'm reading your work at the Washington Post, and I know you live down by Patterson Park, by the Pagoda, where all the good beer is. And you got great pizza in Highlandtown, right? You got Matthews, you got Verde, you got places you can go and get great pizza.
Johnny Rad's,
right up the street, of course, right? So you got your spots, but like I said to you, well, we're doing the show in the next month, but like I'm at Pizza John's. I've never been there. I heard it's good. And I'm like, well, then get your ass to Essex.
Yeah.
Welcome. How are you?
Legendary. Good, man. Much better now that I've had a slice of that meat, the Luke special, whatever that is, meat lovers special.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
There was no bacon on that or sausage. If he was really loving meat, he'd be doing all of that,
That was good.
How's life? I mean, you're back on the real baseball beat. Dave Sheinin, if you are unfamiliar, covered the Orioles at the turn of the century for a number of years. He's covered the NFL, covered Olympics, but it says Washington on it. But he ain't from Washington. He lives here in Baltimore.
That's
and
right.
You lived here when you covered the Orioles 30 years ago, and sort of never left Baltimore, right?
Never left. I mean, just fell in love with the city. Never wanted to leave. Never really took to D.C.
Where were you from originally?
Grew up mostly in Georgia.
So I didn't even know that about you.
Yeah.
So you were a Braves guy, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, back in the day, yeah. Well, no.
Jane.
The Francisco Cabrera hit that won the pennant was
the
like
Sid
the
Bremer?
pinnacle of my the pinnacle of my youth.
Did I ever tell you what happened in that game? The Orioles were 92, 91, 90. It was 92.
It was 92.
It was 92. 1992 was the first season that we had a radio show. It was the first season we came to the Yards. I befriended David Segui, right? Because his father played with my cousin with the Red Sox, right?
Yeah.
Diego Segui. So David Segui and I are same age. We're a couple months apart. And we just kind of hit it off. He was like a trying to make the team kind of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And kind of a prospect kind of guy. And I realized the players, I know all those guys, Jack Voigt, Brady Anderson, all those guys, they had tickets for the World Series. And this is before these guys scalped them and did all that stuff the NFL players did. They just had, as a player in the Players Association, they had a right to buy strips of tickets, right? And I knew this being around them. And I said to Segui, you can get World Series tickets? He's like, yeah, man, I don't ever get them. But, like, if you want them, tell me, I'll get you tickets. And I'm like, all right, well, if the Pirates get into the World Series, because the 92 Orioles were no good, right? They weren't going to the World. They weren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
They were going to 1993 is where they were going. They were going into receivership with Peter Angelos at that point. So Segui got me the tickets. And I got him through the front. Rick Vaughn was involved, I think, at the time. And I paid my $242 for the strips. And I had 4 tickets, 4 strips. And I'm 23 years old. My beer buddies, Johnny Raffalidis, Kevin Eck, probably Swish Morrison at that point. We had World Series tickets, right? We haven't been to the World Series since '83. None of my buddies have been to World Series games. We're like, we're going to drive to Pittsburgh. Bonds, Van Slyke, we're going to the World Series. So I had tickets. They were all over my house on Kane Street. We're drinking. We're like in that game watching that. Dude, when Bream slid into, I watched it on my timeline a couple days ago. Shut up.
That's amazing.
When he slid into home plate, I was like holding the strips of the World Series tickets, and I'm like, we're not going to the World Series. And that was in 1992.
Yeah.
Little did I know in 2025 I'd be sitting in Essex. You still haven't been to a World Series game, have you?
I have not.
In your life, you've never been to a World Series game.
I've been to a Super Bowl, but never a World Series game.
See what it means with the World Series, man. You've been to 10,000 World Series games, Mr. Wright. I've been to. I did the math. I did the 57 World Series games in my life.
Okay.
I've been to 57 World Series games.
Okay, I'd have to add all mine up. I
But
think it's over 100. Yeah,
but it broke my
years.
heart. That moment, I'm like, I'm never going to go to the World Series. I would be if I was just an Oriole fan or if I had a press pass here. But like for me, that Bream thing was every baseball moment is a memory, right? I mean, when you love the game as much as we love the game, you remember every no-hitter, every minute, every girl, every Devereaux foul ball home run in 1980. Baseball marks those things in that way. And that's what makes baseball so beautiful, especially when guys get together and love baseball.
I mean, I have made the argument to other people that was the most dramatic moment in the history of baseball. And everybody has their own thing, the Bill Mazeroski homer, the Bobby Thompson homer, the David Freese, the Aaron Boone, whatever your moment is. But this was the only scenario where the Braves were down to their last strike and were going to lose they were going to lose the pennant if there was one more strike. But on that next pitch, they not only didn't lose the pennant, they won it. It turned from a loss to a win that won the pennant and took the Braves to the World Series, and that's never happened in any other scenario. Like even if Aaron Boone doesn't hit his home run, it's still a tie game and goes into another extra. If Bobby Thompson doesn't hit his home run, the game's still
even
going.
Mookie and Buckner, right? The
Yeah.
ball went through his leg. They played another game.
They had to win another game.
They played another game.
This was Game 7. It was the 9th inning. It was 2 strikes, 2 outs, and the Braves were down a run. So if Francisco Cabrera strikes out, game over, Pirates in the World Series. That pitch turned 180 degrees
for the Pirates as well. I mean, that
they ain't been back since.
They never
died for them. I mean, of course, they still have a franchise.
Barry Bonds moved on.
Bonds
in free
moves on that winter.
It's all over. Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, at that point in time, they were 13 years removed from beating the Orioles in '79. They had won in '71. Clemente was baseball royalty, and you think about what that meant for them. So you present a very compelling argument there. While I wouldn't think of that as like a top one, but it's an underrated one, no question about it.
There's not another scenario where you go from losing the pennant to winning the pennant on one pitch.
I got lottery tickets. I got French fries, all that stuff. I feel bad about those tickets that I mail back. I have a Xerox of them. I made a little Xerox of the World Series tickets and a strip, and they were up in the 751 up in up in a roof of that trash bowl in at Three River Stadium. Imagine being a Pirates fan, how bad you would feel if you were holding those tickets. Yeah. Because, I was holding those tickets for the Orioles at various points where it looked like they could make the playoffs in *89. I had strips of World Series tickets in '89. I worked at the paper then.
Was that the Why Not year?
That was the Why Not year, and it didn't happen. But where are you on the Orioles? He and I have been arguing for an hour. We've been arguing for 6 months about off-season, what they did, what they didn't do. I think it's a weirder conversation now. And I haven't talked to you all off season. I'd have hit you 6 weeks ago before spring training, like, well, they're this, they're that, whatever. But Rodriguez was healthy, and Kittredge was going to pitch, and Henderson was going to play, and Mayo was going to make the team. Like, all of these things that have transpired, it's typical baseball. But he and I both feel like it's a little diminished right now. It is in New York, too, for the Yankees, but it's a little diminished, as I have French fries and ketchup.
I would say, first of all, I think they missed an opportunity. This was the offseason to go for it. This was the offseason to go all in. You got the new ownership. You want them to show what they're made of. You want them to put their money where their mouth is. They had a big opportunity here. The core is in place. Everything is in place. When you rebuild a team, you're at the point now where you build it up. And they didn't do it. And,
what did you want to see them do?
Well, bring back Corbin Burns. Re-sign him or at least somebody equivalent. That would have been where I'd start with a number one starter, a number one pitcher. But I also would say that in this day and age with the expanded postseason, the regular season is diminished overall, and I think is a higher than likely shot that the Orioles make the playoffs with all these wild cards and stuff. And so you don't have to win. This isn't 1992. You don't have to win the division to get into the playoffs. almost half the teams make the playoffs. You just have to be one of those 12 teams, and the Orioles are fully capable of doing that, more than capable of doing that.
When did you start covering the team? 94, 5, 6, somewhere in there?
No. Well, I'll tell you, I'll put it this way. I was an intern in 1990 and spent 3 weeks on the beat as an intern. But then I didn't.
Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, yeah. But then I didn't take over the full-time beat until 1999.
So you came a little. Maskey was before you. I remember that.
Maskey was before me.
Who's now on the NFL beat. I've been at this. This is my 32nd or 35th year on the radio. 35th season on the radio. They've never ever had money to buy players, right?
Well,
they've never had. Now this
they
is
tried
for sure.
once, and it was disastrous.
But
the Albert Bell, Mike Timlin, Will Clark year, which was my first year, 99.
Well, I'm thinking
They
that
spent all that money.
That would have been that era when Peter was nuts, and Luke wasn't on the radio then, but Luke's been with me 17 years now, right? But there was a period where they could buy players in that era with Peter's money, but they couldn't trade for anybody. Alex Ochoa, and we're going to deal Sidney Ponson for a bag of baseballs and whatever. They now have allegedly money, and we can say, well, Rubenstein's rich. If he's going to be a sugar daddy or not, we got to figure that out. He said over at the Beth Tefillo, when I heard him speak, you know, in baseball, we tend to spend what we make. Well, if they're going to spend what they make here, they're not going to be very good.
No.
So that being said, then there's the talent that they've never had the ability to make a July deal because they've never had anything anybody else wanted. They were never willing to take on the money that came with it.
My God.
Like the Eflin deal last year is just an example of something. Angelos never would have done that because they wouldn't have wanted to give up the prospects. They wouldn't have wanted to pay him with a year left on this deal. They are operating more like a normal team than they have in 30 years. But that being said, for 30 years, they didn't have any of these resources to calm me down. Because Luke's the one out of his mind, even though he's the one with the press pass, that I am the guy that has been the voice of reason to say, you're on the far end of they have to go get Corbin Burns for me to have confidence in them. For me, I feel like, all right, picked up a couple pitchers. They didn't spend a lot of money. They're saving ground like a horse race and it's sort of like, okay, he was yelling last week. Sign Robertson, $10 million, and he and I got into it, and he's like, well, if you don't have $10 million to sign a relief pitcher, you're not serious. And I'm like, well, then we ain't been serious in 30 years here because I've never seen him do it. And that unto itself, well, this guy's hurt. Well, let's go spend some money and replace him. We've never seen that here, or we're not good enough. It's July. Let's deal Mayo or Cowser or a real player. Deal something that isn't a bag of baseballs to go get Scooble if the Tigers stink or whatever, Cease, whoever the flavor of the summer is. They've never been able to pull off those things, and because I have the confidence that they can do it now and the resources, I'm the one that deserves the press pass. I'm being nice. I am more patient. I mean, patient in regard to all the things you just said, like they're going to make the playoffs anyway. Yeah, they're going to be fine. Yeah. They're going to be in the race in July. And then that's when you want to get in there and tinker out of your strength, which is the depth of the organization. You hope that Holiday's so good, and you hope that Mayo's here, and you hope you're not even talking about dealing those guys. But their pitching's not good enough. They're going to need more pitching.
Right.
They're going to need, with money or with resources, they're going to need more pitching.
Let's put it this way. They're following the Houston Astros model, right? Right down to the teardown, right down to the GM of the team was part of that Astros front office. But the Astros, once they built their core around Altuve, Correa, Bregman, their studs, they went out and got Justin Verlander, and they went out and got Garrett Cole, and they went out and got Roberto Osuna, who was a piece of crap human being, but he was a great closer. They got the pieces they needed to take them over the hump and win a World Series. Now, the World Series was tainted by the cheating scandal, but they won a World Series, and they did it by supplementing their core with massive big-time acquisitions on the free agent and trade markets, and that won them the World Series.
And some of their guys they paid, and some of their guys they didn't pay. Well, right? At the end, that's the way it is.
Right, yeah. Correa's gone. Bregman's now gone. Yeah, you can't keep everybody.
The Yankees didn't even keep Soto.
And the Yankees didn't keep Soto.
Right? Dave Sheinin is here. Washington Post. Luke is here. Have some French fries and gravy. This is another thing. These are appropriate bowling alley fries. I mean, that's what I call – we call them that? Crinkle cutters?
I don't know. I haven't spent enough time in bowling alleys, I guess.
Fries and gravy. This is a real Baltimore thing.
I do like
Get you some. Luke, I want to bring you into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
As reporters being around the team and accessing questions and answers and all of that stuff. What are your biggest questions in regard to this that won't be answered until we get to this thing, other than injuries themselves? I mean, I think Rutschman sits at the middle of just as something that I got to be watching early on.
Yeah, I mean, it has to. It's a non-starter. He has to look like Adley Rutschman again. And I struggled last year talking about this, and we'd ask Brandon Hyde about it, and Adley's the type who doesn't say a whole lot in most scrums in the clubhouse, but he was below replacement level the second half of the year. I mean, this wasn't a slump. Gunnar had a slump in July, but he was and a underwhelming second half, but he was still an above-average player in the second half of the season. I mean, Adley Rutschman was below replacement level, so he needs to be that guy, not just because he's that important to their offense, not just because Gunnar Henderson is questionable for the start of the season at best. I mean, I think he's probably going to go on the IL and miss a week, maybe 10 days, which isn't that devastating to the big picture, but they also need Adley Rutschman to be Adley Rutschman from a catching standpoint. And when you have this pitching, the pitching staff, bullpen and rotation that has question marks, not to say that his defense was necessarily impacted by whatever the heck was going on with him in the second half last year, but it's all related. Right, and he's very much a mojo guy. I mean, we all saw from the moment he was called up
leadership thing.
In mid-May of 22, they played mediocre baseball for another 3 or 4 weeks, and then they were a playoff caliber team the rest of the year, and that carried over to 101 wins in 23. And I'm not saying he did it alone, but he was very much the face of all that. So he needs to be the Adley Rutschman we saw over the first 2 calendar years, or
we're watching Basayo.
Then I have questions about their offense, too, because I just think, the on-base and just the premium offense you get from a spot that's not typically an offensive-minded position. They need that. If he looks like himself, and assuming Gunnar, and I'll take that at face value, if he's not ready for opening day, I don't think he's going to be out 2 months or anything crazy. The rest of that offense, then it's like, all right, what can the rest of these guys do? But if he's not himself, then it's like, okay, Jackson Holliday needs to take a step forward, and Heston Kjerstad needs to take a step forward. So Rutschman's number one, but, after that, then all those other questions become less critical to me, assuming that, some of those things are going to happen at the very least, some, if not all, but they need Rutschman to be Rutschman again. I mean, there's just we haven't spent too much time talking about it this offseason because it's just that completely understood that he has to be the guy he was prior to last July.
Why do these guys not admit they're hurt, Dave? I mean, you've been covering the game a long, long time. Like, what would be hard about saying I was battling something? Like, even in the offseason or during the caravan, or just get it out there that something was wrong last year other than Adley Rutschman.
I'll tell you, I understand not acknowledging it during the season. I find it strange that he hasn't said anything even after the fact. After the fact, I've seen this a million times. Guys play their season hurt. They don't say anything about it. They hide it. But then the next spring training, they come back and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to come clean now. I mean, I was playing with –
Do you remember the Flacco injury in the Indianapolis game where they ran the ball? They lost that game?
Yeah.
He admitted to me 3 years later, once he won the Super Bowl. I remember being with him at writing
3
the book.
years.
3 years later, I was with him writing the book in Philadelphia at his neighborhood joint. It was March Madness Thursday is when it was. And we were sitting around watching. We had an iced tea. And he almost pulled his pants down. He's like, I had a purple cue ball on my hip. He said my hip was as purple as my jersey. He said he had pictures of the jersey and his hip to show how purple it was. He said, he told me that 3 years later. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you weren't playing. You were gimpy. He's like, nah, dude, I couldn't practice. I couldn't move, like literally. Yeah. But he didn't, I was in the locker room. That was the night Ed Reed wanted to retire. Remember that one?
Which time?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's why. But in a general sense of us talking about Adley Rutschman right now, just a simple acknowledgement that foul tip last year did something to him.
You'd think he would say that.
It's in everybody's best interest to just be honest about it. That's all. It would make us feel better about where he is now.
He's alluded to it, and of course, I'm saying this from a secondhand position because I haven't been down in Sarasota this spring, but I know he's mentioned it in passing a couple of times in terms of getting his body right, things like that. So is that enough of an admission that there was an issue? And maybe it was something minor, but then you develop some bad habits as a hitter as a result to compensate for a hand or a back issue or whatever, and then it kind of snowballs. So, I mean, look, us three guys are sitting here talking about baseball because we can't play it for a living.
That is correct.
So it's very difficult. So was there a combination of both going on there? Maybe, but he's at least alluded to it. But yeah, I mean, Dave knows, whether you're covering the NFL and you hear during OTAs that so-and-so had sports hernia surgery, so-and-so had his knee cleaned up, this guy had his shoulder done, or, spring training, same thing. That's usually when it comes out. That's why the fact that they've still been so vague about it has made, left a little bit of a mystique about it where you just kind of hope that, okay, hopefully he's Adley Rutschman again because they need him to be.
My theory is that he got out of shape during the season. And that's not just idle speculation. I mean, I've had scouts tell me that he looked like he was out of shape by the end of the year. I don't know, I don't know if that he could have been compensating for an injury in appearing that way, but I think that may be part of what was going on.
Well, so much of what they do there is strength at this point. That's where Jackson Holiday has been and all. Look, first day at camp, I wasn't down there in February. But all the reporters are down there. It's like they had steroids. Everybody's bigger. Everybody's stronger. I mean, we used to say that about Brady Anderson. He had some milkshakes over the winter. I don't know what they do 30 years later, but there are guys that beefed up over the offseason because strength is the game, right?
Best shape of my life, right? That's one of the classic storylines of spring training.
Well, I feel that way. Thanks for asking.
Best shape of my life.
Yeah. And a 21-year-old doing that is normal. A 35-year-old, which was the case in baseball for 25 years, where we all raised our eyebrows. That's a little different when Barry Bonds is changing his body type in the
this
the
is
October
exactly
of his
the
career.
things that you would be writing about, and Boswell was writing about with the Bash Brothers all these years ago. What are you doing on the baseball beat right now?
Me?
Yeah, in the fact that there are two teams here now, and the money's now the Masson thing. I mean, these are interesting franchises moving forward because of the level setting of all of it. And from a guy that once wrote a book on RG3, the fact that they have a wonderkind football player down there and we have a wonderkind. This is an interesting – and you've been at Capitals practice all morning with 888 and, the Russian Tsar King guy. But
and they've been great, by the way, too.
Ovechkin, the Caps – the Orioles and the Nationals thing, where the Ravens and the Commanders are. The Terps are about to play in an hour here at Pizza John's. This is
both Terps teams.
Yeah, it's a good sports time right now.
It is
to be in the sports business.
It is about as good as we've ever had it in some ways.
Well, the Orioles have always stunk, and the Redskins have always stunk, right?
Right. So, and I mean, the Orioles are right there. They're in it, and of course the Ravens are always in it. And and in DC, I mean, well, we have to account for the Wizards somehow, but other than them, man, great time to be a DC sports writer. Let's put it that way, or a DC/Baltimore sports writer.
What's interesting for you on baseball, on Enterprise, on things like? We mentioned steroids is something 30 years ago that was interesting. These surgeries with these pitchers, it's the biggest story in the sport, right? I mean, it's the biggest story for not just Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
But my wife has a guy at work whose kid's 16 years old. Tommy John, last year, 16-year-old.
All right, I'll tell you, that dovetails into what I was going to answer your question with, which is what's interesting to me about baseball. To me, the most interesting thing going on is the product on the field and the way that they – saved the game in some regards by putting in the pitch clock and certain things that sped the game up, fixed the aesthetics of the game, which had deteriorated to the point where, honestly, I quit covering baseball full-time in 2021, and it was in large part because I found it to be unwatchable anymore. The shift, the length of games, the average game was getting up to like 3 hours and 30 minutes. It was just way too long.
Lefty, righty, righty, lefty, righty.
And it was all dead time.
Innings,
it was all dead time.
Right.
The games were half an hour longer than 30 years ago, but all of it dead time. There's no more action going on. So they did a lot of things that fixed the game. Theo Epstein left the Cubs to join MLB to be this rule czar, fix the product on the field. But they still have a problem that they can't quite figure out, which is the prevalence of velocity and stuff, and that is getting into the Tommy John epidemic. Baseball has one MO right now in terms of run prevention if you're a team, and that is to put guys on the mound who are going to throw max effort, max velocity as often as they can, and then when he peters out, we're going to bring in
There's
a new
no
one.
finesse.
There's no finesse, and it's just a parade of guys throwing 100. Okay, the human arm is not built to withstand that over a long period of time. That's why you have the Tommy John epidemic in baseball. That's also why there is less action in the game now than ever. There is about 20% fewer balls in play. And that's even after the Theo Epstein rule changes. Mm-hmm. There are 20% fewer balls in play now than there were 25 years ago. And that's because pitchers are designed to strike everybody out now. That's all they're trying to do. So the ball is not in play. So you're robbed of plays at the plate, great defensive plays, a ball in the gap, a triple, stuff like that they need to bring back. So the product on the field is still, in my mind, not to where it needs to be.
Well, what's the remedy for that?
Okay,
because
so
the pitcher says, I'm trying to take care of my arm. Well, you're not going to pitch today if you take care of your arm.
So I would say the number one solution to that is to limit the number of pitchers that you can carry on the staff down to, let's say, 11 or even 10, which would be pretty tough. Back when I started and you started, there were 10-man pitching staffs, right?
Sure.
And they made it work. You had starting pitchers who needed to get into the seventh inning to save the bullpen. That doesn't exist anymore. Nobody's goal is to get pitched to the seventh inning. Maybe two guys in the game.
Very
maybe
few around the game. Yeah.
But
Buck would have had 15 pitchers if he could have. Right? Literally.
Right.
I mean, literally.
But all they're asking you to do now for the majority of major league teams is to go out there, give us 3, 4, maybe 5 innings at max effort, max velocity, and then we're going to bring in 6, 7 guys to finish it out doing the exact same thing. Nobody's saving any bullets for deep in the game because nobody's looking to pitch deep in the game. So you could limit the number of pitchers on the roster, and that would make teams get innings out of their pitchers.
I think I absolutely think that's an idea with merit, but I think the problem is it's just so systemic. I mean, as he alluded to, you've got 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds needing Tommy John surgery now because they have been taught from an early age, and it continues with showcase and college scholarships and being drafted. Teams want velocity, they want spin, and they want movement. And even if you do that, and I do think that would help, I don't know how much that's going to help guys getting to that point in the major leagues because of all the arm injuries you see in the minor leagues.
It would take a generation
right. I've said to him, to me, the next frontier is you can certainly go that route, or we're waiting for the next advancements in sports science that either comes up with a new UCL reconstruction procedure that is 6 months rather than 12 to 18,
but teams don't even care.
Well, and
teams don't even care if it's 12 or 18. They have 6
more.
What,
though? But we've even seen pitchers. Tyler Glasnow, who's easily one of the most talented arms of the last 20 years. He's talked about this. This guy's had multiple arm injuries, multiple surgeries, and and he's not alone. They've kind of talked about this is how I got to this point. This is how I've made the money I've made to this point. And this is where you almost go back to that old steroids dilemma. Not that I'm ever excusing that from that era, but it's one thing to talk about Barry Bonds. It's the other thing to talk about the quad A player that's stuck at AAA trying to get to the major leagues, and he's seeing what other people were doing, and it's like, well, if I don't do that, I'm not even going to get a chance to make money.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying, right?
So there's that. There's a culture. It isn't just something as simple as a rule change, even though I certainly think long term there's, people have talked about the double hook where if starting pitcher doesn't go X number of innings, you lose your DH. I think that's interesting. I don't know if I'm for that, but it's an interesting idea. But so much of this is cultural, just pressure.
It's hard.
Because, it's easy for me to say, I'm going to be the command guy. I'm going to be the guy that pitches like they did 50 years ago.
You'll never make it.
You're not even going to get a look in college or to be drafted, let alone make it to the majors. So it's absolutely a problem when, we were talking in a previous segment. Garrett Cole was regarded as a horse.
Yeah.
Everyone's durable until they're not anymore.
Well, there's your Corbin Burns argument if you're Mr. Rubenstein.
And that's one thing that's wild about Burns. And look, I'm someone that is very much leery of giving long-term deals to pitchers because of a lot of what we just said. And I pointed to Burns in terms of, look, his K rate from his 2021 Cy Young year, it's dropped every single year. But he has said himself, and I'll take him at least, I don't know if it's 100% face value, but I think there's something to it that he's also going for durability, going for longevity, and I found that to be interesting, because I look at that and say, okay, well, maybe he's not the guy you want to commit a 7-year deal to because of the K rate and velocity and all that. But at the same time, he continues to post up and make 32 starts every year. So, it's tough. I mean, it really is because, again, if we're talking about this as baseball fans having concerns, how do you think these teams feel that, okay, maybe the Dodgers or the Mets, I'm not feeling so sorry for them with their payrolls, but teams like the Orioles, for example, where, okay, maybe they have the money to give that to Corbin Burns, but is that going to be the wisest investment? Just knowing the reality of what these pitchers breaking.
If they gave the money to Garrett Cole, we'd all be having a parade down Lombard Street until he gets hurt.